Oh, well, thank you all for coming. Good evening, everybody. This is Saturday, December the 6th of 2025. We are almost done with the 25, going to the 2026 in about a few days. And so that being said, we are here today to talk about the impact of incarceration in our community. And I want to thank you all for coming in. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be others trickling in, so y'all just be patient. And if we have any questions, we have a young lady over here that has index cards, and I would ask that you write your questions on a card, and she'll relay that to me, and we will present that to the panel here. And so when we talk about the impact of incarceration in our community, a lot of times what I found in my journey in this is a lot of times the community sweeps those things under the rug. They don't really readily talk about they have family members that's incarcerated, or I have a son or a daughter that's incarcerated, or I have a mother that's incarcerated. A lot of times we don't talk about that, and that being suppressed, there's a lot of trauma that goes along with that. There's a lot of shame that goes along with that. But when we come together and start having conversations about this and how it affects our community, that's when real healing begins to take place. And so today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do some healing practices. We're going to bring out some information. We're going to have some people with lived experience talk about it, myself included. And we're just going to have questions. If anybody has any questions, please, by all means, present it to us and we'll answer it as best we can. So that being said, I want to start at the very end of my table. We're going to do a brief introduction and just a little bit about who we are and what we do. And even if we want to say our why, because everybody has a why as to why they do what they do. So I'm going to start at the very far end of the table, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself real quick.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Terry. My name is Jay Kilgo. I am a city commissioner here in the city of Muskegon, and I'm also a candidate for Michigan State Senate District 32 here encompassing Muskegon County. I've been in Muskegon for 19 years. I grew up I was born in Grand Rapids, then I spent some time on the East Coast in the DC area, and then landed back here in Muskegon and have just been trying to be a part of the community ever since being back here in the area.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And if we could just continue to go down the line. Make sure your mics are on.
Yes, I think my mic's on, yeah. My name is Rod Harris. Well, my name is Rodriguez. Everybody calls me Rod. I'm president of Local 278 Union out of Grand Haven. I've been with the company for 37 years, and I've been the local president for 20 years. I'm born and raised in Muskegon. I'm here because I love serving community, helping people, and I'm an information junkie.
And I'm Latisa Moore. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in Muskegon. I was born and raised here. However, I moved away and returned in 2013. I am also a child of a parent who had been persistently incarcerated while I was a child, and all throughout my school years and even early adulthood. And so just have that lived experience of being really a survivor or one that had experienced that trauma. I'm also a supervisor of a program, Family Outreach Center, and then I also have a private practice counseling agency.
Awesome. Can everybody hear pretty good out there? Okay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Clay Roberts. Been out in the Muskegon area for 3 years now, born and raised in Grand Rapids. I am a writer, author, filmmaker, own a business called Rub and Grub Seasonings, or a brand, I should say, called Rub and Grub Seasonings. I also run a fatherhood organization called All Things Fatherhood, so I'm an advocate for fatherhood. Have lived experience with the system. Father was in and out of prison before he was murdered, and currently have a brother that's serving 27 years. So that's
Okay, so one of the reasons that I asked these panelists to come is because of their experience. And not only because of their experiences, because I do know them personally. And I thank you all for that input. Definitely, that is really helpful. So my name is Terry Johnson. I am not from Muskegon. I made Muskegon my home in 2011. So I've been here about, 14 years, 15 years, something like that. I don't know. Time goes by so fast. But I am from Detroit, Michigan. I grew up in Detroit. And when I tell you, as one of the panelists with lived experience here, been there, done that. Okay? So when we talk about the impact of incarceration within our community, I grew up on the east side of Detroit where I've seen the impact of incarceration from a very young child. In fact, when we talk about childhood trauma or ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, I think that no child at the age of 9 should have an encounter with law enforcement in a negative position. So I was 9 years old when I first had that encounter, and I had a police officer pull a gun on me because we were children playing in our neighborhood. And this guy got out and pulled out his gun and told us to leave the area with his gun in his hand. And so that was my first experience. And when I say that was traumatizing, it set up something in me that mounted and built over years. And so when I talk about the years of being exposed to that kind of lifestyle, whether it was drug abuse, which I've been in that area, where there's been crime, I've been in that area as well. I did 22 years in the Michigan Department of Correction. But during that time, one of the things that I wanted to do going into the system is I wanted to come out better and not bitter. Does that make sense to anybody? I wanted to come out to be a better person, and I didn't want to be bitter. So I had to figure out if I wanted to be part of the problem again or if I wanted to be part of the solution. I chose a solution. So today I sit here as that person who's turned his life around and wants to make a positive impact in my community. A lot of people say, I want to help clean up the things I help mess up. We can say it that way, but I'm from Detroit, and I just want to be a part of a positive impact on my community, and this is my community. And so I'm going to start with some questions with our panelists. And if you have any questions, anybody have any questions, please feel free, jot it down, and I'll have it relayed to me, and then I will present it to the panelists. And then we'll keep going from there. So I want to say, Jay, you had mentioned your father being in and out of prison. I'm sorry, Clay. Clay, Jay, they're so closely related. The Freudian slip, okay. But you had mentioned that your father was in and out of prison. If you could just speak to that, how did that affect you as a young person? We're not going to get to the part where there was the actual murder yet, but we'll probably unpack that a little bit because that was traumatic as well, I'm pretty sure. Because I had a death close to me that was very traumatic. But in terms of your father in and out of prison and you being a young child, a young man, how did that affect you?
Well, for a long time, I didn't know. My mom obviously raised me and my brother as a single mom. When my dad was out, you knew he was there, he was present, and when he wasn't, then we didn't really understand it. I'm an 80s baby, so grew up in the 90s. And it wasn't until I was about 9 years old, 10 years old, that I asked my mom, like, what's up with our dad? Like, because when he's around, right? He's present, he's buying everything. And then at sometime around that age, she pretty much let me know that he was in prison or in jail or whatever stint. And I guess from a mental perspective, I never really thought about how it made me feel. I just knew he wasn't there. But my mom was handling things, so when he got out, I knew he loved us and he was present for us and he wanted the best for us, but it was a constant cycle because he was in and out all the time, whether that was jail or whether that was prison. And as I got older, prior to him dying, I know you said we weren't going to discuss that, it did start to impact me more because as a young teenager growing up, I stopped listening to my mother. I needed my father present, and he wasn't around. So she had a difficult time with me for a little bit around the ages 12, 13, and 14, where if he was there and present, things would have probably been a little bit easier.
Mr. Harris, I call Rod Mr. President. I call him that because he is the president of the union. So I say that in a good sense, Mr. President. Is that okay with you? Okay. Is your mic on?
Yeah, I think it's on that.
So you've been 20 years president of the union. Prior to that, as a youth, did incarceration or anything in that fashion touch your life?
Yeah, my dad was in prison the majority of my life as well, in and out. Like Clay, I was unaware of that at a young age. You know, I really did not see my dad, lay eyes on him until I was about 19 or 20 years old. So that was my first encounter with him, and that was pretty much like in passing. My dad was a street guy, so he was a hustler, so he was always on the move. And then from there, I didn't see him again until I was about 42. I'm 57 right now, so I'm just giving y'all a timeline. I was 42 the next time I saw him, and he needed me. And I've always been, I've always worked, but I've always been had property as well. So I had a couple of rental houses, and he needed somewhere to stay, so I let him stay in one of my houses. Even though I didn't really even know him, but as a parent, as a child, you always have a connection with your biological parents. So I just knew he needed a place to stay, and I could provide that, not really knowing who he was as a man, but I just knew that he needed somewhere to stay, and I did that. And then he wound up going back to prison, and I didn't see him again until I was about 48, 47, and he got out and last stint, and again, nowhere to stay. So my mom called me this time. She was like, your dad called. He's in Grand Rapids and walking the streets. He says he needs somewhere to stay. And so the bitter side of me was like, he can't stay with me, And then I heard my grandmother in the back of my head, and I was like, you blessed to be able to help. So why not do that? So I went and got him an apartment on Sanford Street, and fully furnished everything. He didn't have to. All he had to do was put his bags down. I bought his beds, furniture, microwave, TV, food, everything, linen, towels. He didn't. All he had to do was put his bags down when he got there, and so he was so overwhelmed with that, and he was like, I ain't never done nothing for you to do this for me. And I just give it to God. He blessed me. I've been, regardless of my lack of having my father in my life, I've been abundantly blessed. So I just wanted to, keep that going.
Let me ask you this. Him in and out of prison, and you not seeing him for the first time until you was what? Did you say 19? Did that affect you?
I can't say it really did, because I was unaware. I always knew that I was different, because my mom was married, and I had my brother and my two brothers and my sister, and that was she was married to their dad. So I was
so you had a man in the house.
Correct.
Okay.
And so
gotcha.
I always knew that there was a difference, there, but I can't say it affected me, but deep down inside you always have that hole, like you want to know.
Yeah, there's something missing.
And unlike Clay,
Absolutely.
I came up in the early 70s. So at that time, you weren't asking your parents questions. You wasn't coming out saying, hey, what's up with my dad? Or, hey, can I do this? That, you stayed at a child's place. So I just never said anything.
You grew up in the 70s?
I grew up in the 70s.
Why am I always the oldest guy sitting on the panel? This is like a trend for me, because I grew up in the 60s. This is a trend, but it's okay because I feel good being an elder. Did you have anybody that were close to you, siblings, cousins, or anybody that went through the cycle of incarceration?
Yeah, my cousins. I had a couple of cousins that was in and out of prison as well. You know, I just knew I wanted better for myself and
Right.
wanted to try to be that example.
Okay.
You know, not one just speak on it, but I wanted to be that living example.
Right. The reason I asked that question, and when we talk about this and we open these kind of dialogues, is there something called, when you spoke to the cycle, there's something called the cycle of intergenerational incarceration. And so that thing will pass down from one to another. And it might not be a direct, but it'll be somewhere in that line where incarceration will happen later on. Because I kept trying to figure out, as a young boy, encountering, like I said, at a very young age, encountering this, this mishap with the law enforcement. And I remember when I got incarcerated, and I asked my mother the question, because I grew up in an absentee father home as well. I asked my mother this question: you got to tell me something about my father, because I don't know anything about him. And I remember when she finally had to answer that question, she took a deep breath, and it was almost like a sigh of relief. And what my mother shared with me, she said, your father killed a police officer years ago in Texas and was never caught for that. He ran all of his life. But when I think about that, and I understand that, and this is just me, I understand that sometimes the sins of the father will pass on to the children, to generations. That's where that intergenerational incarceration comes from. It starts with one, but what we do here today is when we begin to have these open dialogues like this, we want to break that cycle and bring the healing. And we do this by having these conversations. And so me, myself, when I was incarcerated, I said, man, I got to go find my son, because I was young when he was born. And when I got out, I went to search for this guy, and I found his mother. She said, I'm so glad you called. You have 5 grandchildren. I was like, amazing. She said, but I got something to tell you. Your son just went to prison. And I'm like, And so that generational thing kept happening because we didn't have dialogue. I think I'm dying. We didn't have those open dialogues because we thought that those were shameful things, and we didn't want nobody to know that we were dysfunctional. When I say dysfunctional, we were dysfunctional. And so there's a lot of families that suffer for those dysfunctions, because when we know the top 5 dysfunctions, we know the emotionally devoid family, where you never hear, son, I love you, mama, you know what I'm saying? Because I had to think about it. When did my mother ever tell me she loved me? And I was like, I don't remember. So I was part of that. But now when we have these conversations, this is what we do. We're going to break down those walls. And we're going to begin having the healing take place by having these conversations. So I want to go to my next panelist, Miss Latisa. So you mentioned that your mom was incarcerated. Was that in and out? I think in and out. So how did that affect you?
Well, early on, there was a lot of detachment. I think as the primary breadwinner, which my mother was, because I don't remember my father working, but I grew up in a household where there was significant, activity, things that were done that was probably illegal, all of those different things. But my mom started going to prison probably when I was very young, going to jail and in and out of jail, in and out of prison when I was very young. So I believe there was an incident where we must have went to a store, and I was still able to be held, and she was arrested. So that was a traumatic experience for me. But I lived with my grandmother and my aunts. I've lived even in high school, in the 11th grade by myself. My grandmother paid the rent, and I lived in the house by myself, and my siblings were living with other individuals. And I also had periods of time where I was the parentified child as caring for parentified child. So I am the oldest, and so I do have 3 siblings, and one is disabled, total care. So it was a lot of responsibility. Another thing is difficulty in relationships, being attached to people. Why? Because that significant attachment to my parent was broken, repeatedly broken. So I mean, it really affects trust, ability to trust, also exposing you to the potential of being, taken out for foster care, all of that, moving back and forth, vulnerable to things happening like abuse or even, I would say, emotional neglect, because you're not getting the care that you supposed to get as a child. So I had to grow up real fast, taking care of adult things when I was still processing and a young person, growing throughout my childhood years. But it also created a lot of fear. Another thing that was significantly going on is there was mental illness that really impacted my parent. And so it was a lot of paranoia about the police coming to our house, coming to, we're going to get arrested, the phone's tapped, all of those different things. So as a young person growing up in that environment, it created a lot of fear for me. Like, if the police, look, I don't do nothing to get in trouble, okay? I ain't getting in trouble. That is not happening, all right? We're not. Now, I called myself trying to steal one time, right? And got caught, okay, when I was a kid. After that, it was no more, right? So it's like if I hear the police as it's like I'm automatically kind of like, what's happening, So it's just a lot that significantly impacts a young person as you grow up in, these life experiences and dealing with people. So it's definitely a lot.
Main causes that now when the youth encounter police in the neighborhood, they run. They automatically run because the connotation behind seeing law enforcement come through your community is I'm about to get locked up, even though I haven't done anything.
Right.
And so that sets up those early traumas in children. Because right now when we see in our community, we see a lot of our children, the behavior that they're displaying is because of what they're going through or what they have gone through. And probably are still going through because it's a cycle. If that cycle is not broken, that children is constantly exposed to that complex trauma. Go ahead.
And I mean, even places are shutting down. Like, you don't necessarily know when you're going to shut down and not have anything to say. And so I've been in situations with that as well. It's like, sometimes for me, it's like, don't just jump up asking me a question, like, and it's like, I might go blank, right? And so sometimes you have to be aware of those things where it's like, I'm not trying to be funny, but I don't have nothing to say yet, okay? I'll talk to you in a moment when I can fully get my words together and all of that. You just never know when it's going to come up. So it's like, just give me a minute.
That's good. Just to let y'all in on a little bit, when I first came to Muskegon and got my first job as a recovery coach, Leticia was my supervisor. So
yes,
we have a little history going on here. And I remember being in her office and her sharing some stuff with me, and then the way she would talk to me, I'd be like, why are you talking to me like that? But this was my supervisor, and she's a wonderful person. And that's one of the reasons why I had her. I said, can you do this? And so that's good stuff, though. I understand. I got you. So I want to talk to Mr. Kilgo down here on the end. You grew up in Grand Rapids. At any point in Grand Rapids, and I'll just say from youth up, did you ever see, experience, or have anything like incarceration, law enforcement in your, I don't want to say just your family, but just your circle?
Yeah, so I actually did. My father was a civil servant his whole life. He was with the fire department, GRFD. But my older brother was the one who had run-ins with the law and would go in and come out. And then he aged out of my father's house. So when he came out that last time, he wasn't coming back into my father's house, according to my father. So it just makes me think about where I am now and what I do now and services that are in our communities. Because sometimes people make mistakes. You go, you serve your time, you come out, you can lean on family. You know, my son puts me up, or, you know, I can move back in with my parents or something. But some folks, when they come out, the families shut the door, or the family's not there or gone. And I remember my anticipation of him coming home, like, oh, I know he gets out this year, blah, 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 because I looked up to my older brother. And he wasn't able to come home to my dad's house. I didn't understand that, you know. So bouncing around, finding whatever services he could at the time, ended up right back in prison again for something else. So it did affect me. You know, I was actually on the other side. I was a law enforcement officer for a short stint. But I would always just talk to some of the guys who I knew that were about to get out when I was serving. And because I worked in the jail down, not here, but where I was living. And I would ask them, you know, do you have plans? Do you have somewhere to go? Do you have, you know, have you thought about what you're going to do, where you're going to stay? Because to me, it kind of all starts with that roof over your head.
Yep.
And if you don't have that roof over your head, then you're going to do whatever, whenever, wherever to survive. So I would talk to them and try to talk to them about, hey, here's some services. If they didn't have something, hey, try this, rate these people, call these people.
Awesome.
Because it would just be that revolving door for people who didn't have a plan for what they were going to do. So.
Because I didn't know that you had background in law enforcement. I think that's amazing. So being in that spot, in that space, should I say, you've seen firsthand from men, probably men and women that were locked up. You've seen firsthand the effects of incarceration in that community.
Yeah.
You saw how the families was trying to come to them and how they were reaching out to the families. You saw that.
And who had family, you know, okay, they got something on their commissary. They don't. They got family. They don't have anybody that's looking out for them. So
right.
You could see it. You could see it as a correction officer.
Yeah.
I was a sheriff's deputy, Fulton County. You could see who had support just by what was on their books and stuff.
The behavior too.
Yeah, and
you
the
could see
behavior.
it.
Yep.
So I'm glad he spoke to that, because when we talk about PICS, and I'm not talking about, when I say PICS, I'm not talking about the PICS that you can take on your phone. I'm talking about post-incarceration syndrome, and that it's a real thing. In fact, I didn't know that I had that thing going on in my life. And so eventually on my own, because I knew in my mind I had to do something, but on my own, I sought out psychological services because I had to go and talk to somebody just to make sure I'm okay. But I'm glad we're talking about that, because what happens in a lot of instances when men and women come home from incarceration, families don't understand the trauma that they went through. Now, I'm not saying, when I say that, I'm not saying that a person should not go to prison. They're there for a reason. But that doesn't mean that it's not traumatic in an experience. Because if you take a man, and statistically, most black men by the age of 32 have already seen solitary confinement. That's a real stat. And so me as a justice ambassador, I do justice ambassador for Prison Fellowship as well. Shout out to Prison Fellowship, because I think we're doing a phenomenal job in terms of making strides to make things better for formerly as well as currently incarcerated people as well as their families. But as a justice ambassador, I've seen the stats across this country where in the 70s, I think the incarceration rate in like the 70s was like 70,000 people per year. And if we fast forward right now, we're looking at 3.9 million people across this country that have some kind of entanglement with the legal system, whether that's parole, probation, incarceration. And when I say that, I'm talking men and women. And I know that women incarceration is rising. It's rising. And if we don't desire to do something about that, to have these conversations, to try to understand why this is happening, because I will say this, there is a systemic plan for incarceration. We know that incarceration is more business than it is rehabilitation. And a lot of people will not admit to that, but it's the truth. So when we talk about rehabilitation, when people come home, we don't really understand what they went through because there was no rehabilitation. And so now that thing when I call post syndrome or post-incarceration syndrome sets up in that person, and the family don't understand. Well, the family was traumatized by that person being gone as well. I had a family member say this to me, 22 years of incarceration, and this family member never come to see me. But it was okay because it wasn't their thing to do. This was my thing to do. And I understood that. So when I saw this person and they shared with me, they said, I didn't come to see you because it was like a death in my family. It was like you died. And I couldn't deal with that. And I was like, what? That's what they told me. They said, you literally was here one day and not there the next day. And it was like you were dead. And I didn't know how to handle that. So families go through traumatic occurrences as well as people that are incarcerated. And what we need to do is we need to sit down and figure out how we can alleviate this, how we can minimize the effects of and get back to some kind of normalcy. I wanted to go back to Clay for a second when we talk about your father and the father not being there. Now, if you get a little emotional or you want to get a little emotional, it's okay. But you can say what you want to say at this point, and it's okay with me. When your father was killed, before I say that, let me say this. When I hear everybody up here talk, and we're from different walks of life, we have more in common than we realize. But here's what we need to do. We all live in silos, doing our own thing. That's not going to help us. We need to come out of those silos. We need to come out of our own thing. Well, I got my thing going, and this is what I do. And we need to just come and sit at the table like we're doing now. Because when you mentioned yours, I was like, what? Your brother went. And when you mentioned your father was killed, my brother was killed. So we've all had these experiences, incarceration, death, substance abuse. As a matter of fact, while I was incarcerated, my mother was incarcerated at the same time. And so we were writing letters and making phone calls, prison to prison. And that set up a whole nother set of issues. But now that we're talking about this and we want to keep this going, but what I really want to do is my plan for this one is we sit here and talk for an hour. We take a break because we do have refreshments in the back. And then we come back and we pick up again. And I'm hoping that there will be questions out here because we have some questions. Okay. And then we can get to start answering that and we can go into some other areas. But here's what I want everybody to know. Whether it's 6 months, 6 years, 10 years, or whatever, a person that's incarcerated and the people that are affected by the incarcerated person, you cannot eradicate the feelings in 6 months. You cannot eradicate the effects of that person gone in a short amount of time. Because when we talk about trauma, I say it like this. Trauma is a hit to the soul. It's not just something that you mentally go through. It's a hit to your soul. That hurts you to your core. Y'all understand what I'm saying? That's a core thing. It's not a surface thing that we could just say, okay, they're home. We're fine now. That's like a thing. But when your father was, can you explain to me when that happened, or can you just talk about how that made you feel? And I say that because I know Clay, everybody. I know Clay. I've seen his determination. I've seen him build his business. This man is an author. He didn't even say that. He's written books. he didn't say that, but I know his experience. And when we talk, I hear his heart. And I say that because you overcame a lot of adversity. And guess what? You still gonna have more to come. But how did that feel when your father was taken away? How did you deal with that? Okay, go ahead.
So can I respond to something else that you said before answering that? So I have 2 or 3 uncles that I was pretty close to besides my father. Every man in my life that I was close to that's a family member has been to prison, right? And thinking about the first question you asked me and the impact of that, it's interesting because it became a normal thing for me, for people around me, that you had somebody in your family that was in prison, especially being a black man. And then growing up in the 90s, crime became a badge of honor for you as a black man, especially a young black man growing up. But to answer the question about my father, ironically, he had just got out of prison. When he was murdered, I don't think he was out of prison for 3 months, maybe 4, before he was murdered. And I was 15 years old when that happened. I was starting to develop a closer relationship with him because, as I stated, it wasn't really much my mom could tell me anymore at that point. I needed life answers that only I felt like my father could give me. And for the most part, he was, from what I understand, was trying his best to be a better man, right? There was a lot of things I learned about who he was later, well after he died, and that I'm learning about now, but I didn't understand at the time. Like Rod's father, my father was a street guy, never held a job, was just a hustler, but he had always been that way since he was 12 when his parents had died. He didn't finish school, anything like that, so all he knew was that lifestyle. He had an addiction problem. I didn't recognize that because when he was around, he seemed like a normal person, but found out he had a drug and alcohol problem well after he died. And he was the type of person that always encouraged me. Like, I can tell you when, right before he died, like a month before he died, he sat me and my brother down and he told me specifically, like, look, I want 3 things from you when you get older. When you have your first child, name that child after me. I want you to graduate high school, and I want you to graduate college. These were 3 things he told me, and then he grabbed my arm and was like, make sure you take care of your little brother. He always influenced me to do positive, despite the fact that his life was chaotic and he was in and out of prison. He didn't want that life for me or for my brother. But when he died, when he was murdered, to know my younger brother, he was a true mama's boy. Like, he didn't leave the house. He played his video games, and he was underneath my mama's butt. Like, it's hard to get him to go out in the streets and do bad things with me, just to be funny. And we were kids, riding bikes, do all that crazy stuff that kids do. But after our father was murdered, my brother became a totally different person. It completely impacted both of us from an emotional standpoint and a mental standpoint in 2 different ways. I was an emotional wreck. My brother became stoic. Something in him flipped, a switch, and from a kid who really didn't want to be much like our father before our father died, he became the exact replica of him after he died. And it wasn't necessarily in a positive way. My brother started selling drugs, started hanging out in the streets. But I attribute that to the fact that our father was no longer there. And that was just his way of attaching himself to a part of our dad that's all he ever heard about, was his street hustling mentality. And for me, it was the opposite. It was, okay, you need to straighten up. You need to finish school, go get this college degree like your father asked. And our lives took 2 totally different paths. At 18, I became a parent for the first time, and at 19, he was on his way to prison, and I'm a year and a half older than him. He's been in prison since he's 19. He has about 6 more years left on his sentence, and I directly attribute the differences in our lives and where he is today to our father being murdered and the lifestyle that our dad lived and he somewhat experienced prior to him being murdered.
Okay, thanks for that, man. I appreciate that. That's real transparency, Clay. That's real transparency. So I want to switch gears just a little bit. I do have a question from our audience, and I want to direct this to Mr. Kilgo. And I only say that because of your experience and your background. There are a lot of programs in the school trying to build positive relationships with law enforcement in the schools. Have you seen or heard if they are helpful?
I think the best way to answer that question directly, we just renewed, the city of Muskegon, we just renewed our contract for resource officers at Muskegon High School and added a second so that they have a dedicated officer to the middle school and a dedicated officer to the high school. I've spent some time talking with our resource officer that's at the high school, and he talks to me about his relationship with a lot of the students and how it's not a adversarial relationship. It is more of a mentoring relationships. So yes, he's there for deterrency and stuff like that, but he spends time talking with a lot of the students. So I think those students that are open to, hey, he could be a role model, or he's an adult that I could look up to, or the young people that are open to that, I think it can be a positive thing. But I think from an overall, like Muskegon County or Michigan, more municipalities need to be doing more things to connect with our community as a whole, and that includes our youth. But if the only time we see police is riding down the street or they have somebody pulled over, that's not building relationships with our community. We need to be doing more in our municipalities.
That is true. One of the things that I endeavor to do, by the way, I am the founder and CEO of the Village Initiative, and that's who's putting this on right today. One of the things that I want to do in the future, this is a future endeavor, and so if you guys want to join in on this and help, is one of these days, I think what we need to do to solve that is somehow have a community day where law enforcement meet their community. Y'all understand what I'm saying? Because there was a time in parts of Detroit where I stayed that we had that. We had law enforcement that would come in and they knew who Terry was. And when they see me, it's like, hey, Officer Gary, okay, listen. But they knew who I was. And if we can get back to that, then that encounter with the youth that they have will not be one of fear. It'll be one of safety. And that's what it's supposed to look like in the first place. I have one more question. And after this question, and I'm going to direct it to the panel in general. After this question, I want us to take a break because there are refreshments back there. And we got to eat that stuff. Okay, we got to eat something and drink something. But that's part of what we do as a community here. And once we do this question, then we'll come back and we'll get back to this. And we won't tarry too long, but we'll get back to what we're talking about. And hopefully we'll have some more questions coming in. How are the leaders of this group bringing this message and information to the community, to the youth groups, or with the mission that's similar to what we're doing here or talking about here?
I just want to kind of compound on what I was talking about,
okay,
and give some quick shout outs.
Okay.
So one of the things I did not have as a young father are groups like Clay's and All Things Fatherhood, people like Norman Young or Lionel Alexander, other people in our community. Terry, the things that you do, it's so important that our men come together, because when I had my first child, long story, I had my first child that I knew about when I was 25 years old. So when I'm that young man, I'm 20, 25 years old, I didn't have guidance from other men to help me get over some of those hurdles and speed bumps that men have. So some of our young men or young fathers go out here in the world and do stupid stuff. So I just really wanted to say, like, we get deep, things get deep, and we're able to talk about things.
Yes.
And when I can, I go to the meetings and just try to be there to mentor some of the young men, because, hey man, I've been through that. Here's some options. Here's some things we can do. That kind of goes back to incarceration also, right?
Absolutely.
So if we have village initiatives, if we have other resources in the community, people can have some guidance, because there's no playbook for, hey, when you get out, here's everything you need to do. Just read the book.
Exactly. That's good.
Oh, and also our state, like the state of Michigan, needs to fund programs
Yes.
for people returning into our communities.
And you know that's something we're going to be looking to you
Yes, sir.
for. We're going to be looking to you for that. But we also have right here in this building, every fourth and second Saturday and fourth Saturday of the month, we have the men's locker room right here. And I would ask Mr. Harris to talk about that. Can you tell them about the men's locker room just real quick? Because we need those places where men can come and talk about those things.
Yes, the men's locker room, I would say, has been very successful. We've had a lot of people come through, men, and as you can see from here today, how difficult it is to get men to come together. There's always more women showing up than men, and so we're trying to change that narrative. So, with Clay's thing, all things fatherhood, I support him, 100%. When he reach out, I'm there. The men's locker room, supporting that. So we're just trying to change the narrative of men in general, because, again, as you can see, there's always, you have an event and then there's a boatload of women that show up, and there's very few men that come out and support. So it's definitely an uphill battle, but I try to be in every room possible to support men in general, and to give my 2 cents of knowledge and wisdom that I have. Meeting Jay today, I'm going to support him.
Absolutely.
I see where he's going. Again, as I'm supporting Clay and Terry as well. So if any men out there, and I know there's only a few, if you guys have any ideas or want to support any of these organizations, the Men's Locker Room or All Things Fatherhood, we'll get the information to you and come on out.
We say that the men's locker room here in Muskegon is that safe, non-judgmental space where men can come and talk about all things men, because we breaking down those what I call the societal toxic narratives. Number one, men don't cry. Anybody believe that? Exactly. So men do cry. We shoulder a lot. And so when we come together, we're able to get into this space where it's just men, and we can talk about all things men, no matter what it is. We air it out, and we have enough wisdom in the room. We have enough experience in the room where we can do those things. And so because you mentioned the man cave and then you mentioned Lionel, I think, and as well as All Things Fatherhood, all of these men groups need to collaborate. Y'all hear that out there? I'm just saying, by the way, we are live streaming. I want y'all to know that. Y'all hear, we need to collaborate and stop being in silos. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to read this last question, and then we're going to take a break. We're going to grab some refreshments, and then we'll come back. And this is open for anyone, and I know who's going to answer it. It's okay. Does Muskegon have neighborhood officers or community policing program similar to the city of Grand Rapids? If no, why not? I don't think nobody want to touch that one.
So the city of Muskegon does have a we have neighborhood resource officers, but they're lacking. They the Muskegon Police Department is short-staffed, I'll say. So they're budgeted for about 71 officers. I would probably say we have about 61 officers right now. Wow. Some of those being, detectives or captains or stuff like that. They're paying young people to go to the academy. So there are opportunities there so that we can have more people, we can have more officers on the street that look like me. That's an opportunity, right? Awesome. At the time when I was a law enforcement officer, in 2010, they just didn't pay me enough. I was in a rural area, and they didn't pay me enough, and I had kids, and I had to support my family. And I was the only black officer on the force. I was the first black officer on the force in Fulton County. But there's opportunity there. So here in Muskegon right now, you have each neighborhood should have one, right? Steele should have one, Marquette should have one, Jackson Hill should have one, NIM should have one. All of our neighborhoods should have a resource officer, but you have one officer covering like 3 or 4 different neighborhoods being that officer. So they'll go to the Steele Neighborhood Association meeting, but then they have to go to the Marquette one and the Jackson Hill one. And so there's just not, they don't have enough of them in our neighborhoods.
So right now we're going to take a break. I encourage any and everybody, there's refreshments back here. And we can huddle up and we can talk. We can huddle up and introduce yourselves to people that are in the same space as you. And then we'll come back and then we'll get back to it. Okay? Give us 10 minutes. Okay, everybody go.